Hey gang, in today's episode I'm going to show you how I clean a Hayward cartridge filter. So let's get going. Alrighty, before we get back to the pool and the filter, I want to go over a few items that you're going to need in your toolbox in order to complete the job without having to run back and forth to the hardware store. So first thing, obviously you're going to need a hose. You want to make sure it's long enough that it can reach to an area with good drainage. I do usually my cartridges in the rock area, but again, you want to make sure your hose will reach there. The other thing you want to get is you want to get a little hose nozzle. This is what I get. If you notice this little piece right here, it looks like a little mini fire hose. It's one of my favorite things. You can get it at like Home Depot or Lowe's for under a couple bucks. And then I also get this little piece right here. That's just a valve, so it allows me to turn it on and off without having to go back to the spigot or the hose bib and turn the water on and off. This is a really good thing because it really accelerates the water quite with a lot of pressure, and so you'll really enjoy using this. It'll help make the cleaning of the cartridges a whole lot better. Like I said, this piece cost a couple bucks, and this piece I just actually bought it today because I had to replace it because I had a plastic one. This one was only $5. So you need this. The next thing you're going to need is you're going to need a pair of channel locks. These channel locks are really big and I use them to bang things, but again, this is really important, or you're going to need some kind of pliers. This is going to help you take out the drain plug from the filter. Also, you're going to want to have a sturdy pair of work gloves. These are a little bit dried out, but I'll get them all fixed up. But these are a few bucks. You can get those at any hardware store. And you really want to have those on because the cartridge filter, or any filter, is usually the container of them. They are encased in a fiberglass shell, and that fiberglass has a coating over it, but over time the elements tend to wear that coating off and it exposes the actual fibers of the fiberglass. And if you get that on your fingers when you're taking the top of the cartridge filter off, then you touch your face or you touch your eyes, that can get into those areas and it's super irritating and it's probably not very safe. So have a good pair of sturdy work gloves that you can use when you're handling that. I always use them when I'm handling the filter and when I'm handling the cartridges, and other than that I don't really worry about it. Alright, so another thing you're going to need is you're going to need some sockets. Alright, sockets, again, you want to get deep well sockets. These are deep well sockets, right? And these are going to help you take the nut off for the belly band. Now, I don't know exactly what size the nut is. I don't sit there and memorize it. I know some people do, but I'm just going to bring a variety of them, and when I get there, I'll let you know which one fits on the Hayward. All right. With that, you want to get a socket wrench or a ratchet wrench, so you can put that on there, and you can break free that belly band nut. Now, I also like to use this tool. Once I've broken the nut free, this helps me really rapidly unscrew that nut, and usually it's a fairly long nut. It's threaded on quite a bit. And if you sit there and try to use the ratchet wrench, it takes forever. So this helps me unscrew it and get it off quicker, and then I can also put it on quicker, and then I use the ratchet wrench to tighten it down and snug it up, okay? Lastly, I believe I'm gonna need a can of heavy duty, right? That's what this is, or industrial strength silicone lubricant. Now, I don't use just typical WD-40. This is going to help me lubricate O-rings, the gasket that goes around the filter on the two parts, because you're going to need that because it'll help create a better seal and prevent that gasket from cracking. And you're also going to use this on the O-ring from your drain plug, so that will help lubricate that and create a better seal. So those are the tools you're going to need. And without further ado, let's get back and start working on that filter. Okay, so I'm here and this is my Hayward cartridge filter, and this has a couple different things going on. This has a dual speed motor, so I'm going to try and break this down for you in steps so that you know exactly what I'm doing and how to do it. So step number 1, ensure that there is no way that your pump motor can turn itself on. So in this case, with this particular Hayward dual speed motor, I go to the stop resume button, push that, and notice that red light comes on right there. That tells me that that motor is not going to turn on and it's safe. And again, it's not really dangerous for me in this case because I'm not sticking my fingers down in this pump area, but it will prevent it from turning on, so that way if it did turn on, when this lid is off, water doesn't go gushing everywhere. So that also prevents that from happening. So that is step number 1. Step number 2 is remove the drain plug. Now on a Hayward filter, the drain plug is usually in the back, and that's it right there. You see it has a big kind of nut with a slot in it. Now you can use a screwdriver to put in there to loosen it up, or you can also use a pair of channel locks. And I usually, in this case, I'm probably just going to use a screwdriver because it looks like it's going to be pretty easy. But again, notice where it is in reference to the filter. There's the front of the filter where the bulkheads are, and here's the back of the filter. So I'm just going to take a screwdriver, put it in there, and break it free. Okay, see how I'm doing this? Just kind of push down. And it shouldn't take a lot to break it free. You don't ever want to over tighten this nut. So I'm just going to break it free. Once I break it free, it probably should turn pretty easy by hand. Now you'll notice, hear that? Water is starting to want to drain. So when I open this, water is going to come gushing out of there, but it shouldn't come out super fast, all right? So remember, I'm going to loosen this, and as I take this out, there's an O-ring attached to this nut that I don't want to lose. So I'm going to open this, and we're going to see some water come out, and that's going to start the thing draining. Okay? All right. So, see the water coming out? Now, I'm going to tell you step number 4 as well. I'm sorry. Step number 3, I think. So, I'm going to loosen and open the pressure relief valve, and when I do, you'll notice the water will come out much faster. Okay, so that's allowing two things to happen. It's allowing the filter to drain, but it's also going to release the pressure. So when I loosen the belly valve and take it apart, the lid comes off easy. You always want to make sure that there's no water in there. So this is the drain plug, and you notice right there is an O-ring. What I'm going to do is I'm going to re-lube that. Now I'm inspecting it. You see that dirt inside there? I'm going to clean that out before I put it back and make sure this is clean, and then I'm going to lube that before I put it back in. But I just want to inspect that O-ring to make sure there's no cracks in it, and they're not, and so we're good to go, right? So we're on step 3, where again, we've opened up the pressure relief valve. Alrighty, so step 4, and as my water's draining, that's totally fine. I'm going to loosen and remove the belly band. Now I went ahead and checked what kind of socket this one uses, and this particular belly band nut uses a 3/4 inch deep well socket. Okay, so this is a 3/4 inch, right? Now you don't really need to see it, but it's a 3/4 inch, and it's on my ratchet wrench. I'm just going to stick it on there. The reason I go with deep well, because sometimes those nuts are pretty long, and I'm just going to use this to break the nut free. Okay, that's all I needed to do is break that nut free. Okay, then now that I have it free, I'm going to grab a hold of this bad boy right here, which I love, and that'll help me to rapidly remove that belly band or that nut, because that nut has a lot of threads that I have to unscrew. So hang on just a second, and I'm going to put this down so I can show you doing this. Okay, so I've got this attached to my little handy dandy thing here. Now there's a nut right, there's also the other end of this belly band nut right here, so I might have to hold that while I loosen this, but once I get it going, it should come off pretty easy. And that will come loose like that, and I unscrew it. And there's my belly band nut. Notice it's just this nut that went in this end, and the bolt that went in this end, and then the nut that went on the other end and joined it, okay? So also, pay attention to this. This label just kind of tells me which side is up on the belly band, okay? Now, I'm gonna put my gloves on to do this next part, because I don't, again, as I warned you about fiberglass, I don't wanna get any of these fiberglass fibers into my hands. So I'm gonna break this belly band free. This one should probably just come right apart. If it doesn't, it actually is a little tight. Now I take my channel locks, or I can take a screwdriver, and I'm just gonna put it in there and pry it apart, and there it broke free. See that? Okay, I'm gonna angle this so you can see a little bit better. Okay, and now I'm gonna use my channel locks again to tap on this side to break that free. Kind of give it a couple of wraps, and off comes the belly band, right? I'm just gonna set this aside for now. And that was the next step. Okay, I got my gloves on. Step 5, I've got the pressure relief valve still open, the belly band's off, The drain plug has been removed, so all the water is drained out. So I'm going to remove this lid, and again, there's fiberglass all over this lid. So, and again, because it's aged a bit, that fiberglass is exposed, and I don't want to get that on my fingers, thus the gloves. I'm just going to wiggle this and lift the lid right off, okay? And there's my lid. Now when I set this down, I want to be careful not to damage that pressure valve. So I'm going to flip it over like this and set it down, okay? Okay, step number 6. I'm going to remove and inspect this O-ring. So this is an O-ring right here that sits right around this groove right here, okay? And I'm going to inspect it to make sure it's not cracked. I'm also going to pay attention to how it was on there, all right? They say that you can have them either way, but I tend to like to keep them in the way that they were. So if this side was up, which it was, I'm going to set this down like that. So this has no cracks, and it's in good shape. So before I put the pump back together, or before I put the filter back together, I'm going to clean and lubricate this. All right, step number 7. I'm going to remove the top guide and manifold, or the top manifold of this. I'm going to pay attention to the order I do it in. There's a little top filter that I take off, and I'm going to clean that before I put it back together. And then there's the top guide, all right? And it is kind of a manifold, and I also, when I remove it, I'm going to wiggle it, and it should kind of come loose, all right? It comes off of this back, there's a back pipe. I'll show this back pipe to you for a second. So this pipe attached to that hole right there. So see that, how that sets on there? Like that, okay? And there's an O-ring there that I want to inspect and make sure it's okay, all right? And it is, so I'm in good shape, okay? So that was the next step, removing the top guide, and now we'll go to the next step. Step is pretty simple. I'm just going to remove the cartridges, all right? And I'm just going to wiggle them, and they'll come right out. I'm going to set them aside for now, and I'm going to move these to the area that I've designated to clean them. And you want to make sure you pick an area with just good drainage. So I have a rocky area that I'm going to move them to. But for right now, I'm just going to take them out. And you notice on the bottom of this filter, there's another guide. See that? That's where the cartridges fit on and sit, so it keeps them in place. All right? Now notice the cartridges. They're kind of dark and they're dirty. They actually were not as bad as I thought they were going to be, but I'm going to clean those. And remember this, you're never going to get them as clean as they were when you first put them in, or the first time you used them. They just get stained, and you just want to get them clean as you can, all right? Also, I inspect these bands, and there's a few cracks in them, but those bands kind of act as a guide for me as to when I might need to consider replacing the cartridges. Those bands will eventually kind of disintegrate and come apart to where there'll probably be hardly any of those on there. That's a good indicator that it's probably time to change your filter cartridges. So I want you to also notice what I'm about to do in the next step. The next step, I'm going to take a hose and I'm going to clean out all the debris and sediment down in the bottom of this. That way, when I put it all back together and fire the filter back up, that sediment doesn't come back up and re-dirty the cartridges right after I've cleaned them. So I want this as clean as possible. So I'm going to get a hose and do that right now, and I'll show you what it looks like after I'm done. So I cleaned out the basin of this filter so it's nice and clean, so that way my clean cartridges will not get dirty with all that stuff back up on top of them. I also took the time when I did that to hose off and clean this rim. That's where that O-ring sat. And I want that clean because it creates a better seal. All right, so then when I clean the O-ring, when I put this back together, I'll set it back in there and I'll lube it with industrial strength lubricant or silicone spring. And I will probably lubricate that O-ring as well. So now I'm ready to take these cartridges to my designated area that has good drainage and start the cleaning process. Okay, so I've got this nice rocky area with good drainage. I got my hose over here already, and I've got my cartridges all lined up. Now you notice I kind of lean them up against these blocks just because with the high pressure, it could knock them over, and I don't want to tilt them too far because I want the dirt to drain off the bottom of them. So I want you also to remember these bands. Okay, these bands are going to act as a guide, because this is how I clean them to do them efficiently, because this can be a really time-consuming process. Even at best, it's time-consuming. So what I do is, if you notice, I've got them set up like this. I'm basically going to take one of these and work one at a time, and I'm going to take the top part of it all the way to this first band. That's going to act as a guide for me, and I'm going to clean it using up and down motions and side to side motions to clean it and go as far around as I can. Usually I get about halfway. Then when I'm done there, I'm going to move down to the next section, and I usually overlap. When I'm doing the top part, I'll go down a little bit, right? And then I'll do the next section and come back this way. And so on, move down to this section, and then do the same thing, and then move down the next section, and then to the bottom. The bottom's always the roughest because all that debris tends to settle down there, so you gotta spend a little more time on it. So I'm not gonna bore you with watching me do all of these, but I finish one half of one, then move to the next one, then the next one, then the next one. Then when I'm done with those, I flip them around to expose the side that I haven't done yet, and I repeat the process. Now, rather than bore you with showing you how I do all of these, I'm gonna put this thing on time lapse and see if we can just have you watch me do just this first one. I'll do this first side of this first one, and hopefully my battery won't die and we'll be able to get this done. Okay, so I just finished the first half of the first one, and you'll notice quite a stark difference between the other ones that I haven't done yet and this one. So again, I'm gonna go ahead and finish up these other three, the half of them, and then I'm gonna put my earbuds in and just listen to some music to pass the time as I'm doing this, because like I said, it's kind of a mind-numbing job. And then when I'm done with these halves, I'll come back and show you how I flip them around. So I am done with the first half of the filters, and you notice they look quite a bit better than they did. And again, look at all that mud. That all came off of those cartridges. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to flip them around like that. I'm going to expose the side that I have not done yet. That way it gives me access to them. Get them completely done, and obviously you can tell I went a little bit further than halfway, so it's pretty efficient today. So now I can hit the rest of this and finish these up. Oh, people have asked me before, how long did that take me? Probably it took me about 35 minutes to do that one side. I base it on just basically how many songs I listen to. So after I'm done with this side, I'll come back on and I'll show you a little trick I use to just give them one little quick once over finishing touch. So I'll see you in a bit. Alrighty, so I am done with both sides of the cartridges, and before I show you that little trick that I do with each of these cartridges before I reinstall them, so I want you to notice that filter, that cartridge right there, and that one right there. You notice they have some, looks like some brown staining. That's basically rust, and that comes from just heavy metals that are in the water, and again, it's the county water, so that's what's in it, and it tends to stain that. Don't worry about trying to get that off. Some people suggest using chemicals that you can soak that in, but my feeling about chemicals is the less the better. So I don't like to use chemicals. I don't like them in the pools. I try to use as little as possible so it's safer, because again, your body is your skin is the biggest organ on your body, and you don't want to put that be absorbing that through your skin. So I just basically say leave it as is. Also, if the chemical is powerful enough to dissolve rust on that, it's going to also dissolve some of the fabric on your filters, which is going to shorten their life. So I'm going to put this on time lapse. I'm going to show you what I do. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each one and hold it, and I'm going to do a quick once over turning it just to get the final amount of debris off, just to give it a little extra clean, and then I will be ready to install them. So I'm going to do the first one time lapse and then cut, and then once I'm done, I'll meet you back at the filter and we'll reinstall everything and put it all back together. Okay, so I am back, and I've got my cartridges back here, and I've already went ahead and I cleaned this area right here. Okay, that's where that lid is going to fit on that O-ring. That's that big gasket that goes around the middle of the filter, and I've already cleaned that, and I've already cleaned this lip as well, which is where the O-ring is going to sit. But one thing I want you to notice is when you first pull those cartridges out when they're dirty, they're going to be pretty heavy. And then after you clean them, you'll notice, wow, they're a lot lighter, and that's exactly what you want them to feel like. So what I want to do is I want to kind of first lubricate everything. So I'm going to kind of get stuff in place. I'm going to get out my industrial strength. You see that it says right there, industrial strength, right above silicone lubricant. So I want a really high quality industrial strength silicone lubricant, and I'm going to lube a couple different areas. One, because this Hayward filter has it, I'm going to lube this O-ring right here. So I'm just going to spray a generous amount of lubricant on that. Okay, that's lubed. Now I'm going to grab my O-ring and I'm going to set it in place. All right, and remember, I paid attention to how I took it off. So I set it in place and it fits right on there. And then I'm going to get my silicone lubricant again, and I'm just going to lube this up really good. And what this silicone lube does, just creates a better seal. So it helps it to stay a little more watertight. And again, the reason I wanted to clean that O-ring is to make sure that there was no debris on it, because then it would create, it wouldn't create a very good seal. And then last but not least, I'm going to take the O-ring on this little doohickey right here, which is my drain plug, and I'm going to lubricate that as well. Okay, and that's that. Now, I'm going to go ahead in my next step and install this drain plug. Okay, so I want to make sure that when I washed it out, that those threads stay clear. You know, notice there's no dirt down in there. So that means the threads are clear. So that way I can just screw this back in by hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread this in, and I'm going to screw it in hand tight. Okay, once I get it hand tight, I'm going to grab my screwdriver, and I'm going to turn it another quarter to half turn just to snug it down. And again, I don't want to go too hard and crank it down too far, because I don't want to break this nut or this plug, and I certainly don't want to break the threads. So that's tight enough. If it leaks after that, you're probably going to want to have to replace that O-ring or even the drain plug itself. Okay, so drain plug's in, O-ring is cleaned and lubricated, so is the rim and the other rim of the lid. I lubricated this. Now I can start putting my cartridges in, and they're very simple to put in. I just put them in one at a time, fitting the hole on the bottom of the cartridge down over one of the guides, and it just fits in just like that. I'm going to do that with all 4 of them. Now, people always say, well, which end is up? Well, some of the cartridges will tell you this end up. Others, though, won't. So as a general rule, if you look at this cartridge, you'll notice as we go down at the bottom, right there at the very bottom, it's a little bit dark. That's because the debris and sediment kind of ends up in the bottom when you clean it off. And so that's kind of a reminder to me which is the bottom. And the other thing, I never really flip them over. I keep them the same side up when I clean them, so I always know which side was up. All right, so there they are, they're in place. Now this is very important. The next step, I'm going to put the manifold on. Now in a Hayward filter, sometimes, depending on the model or the age of them, the manifold's on the top, like this. But in some of the filters, including the Pentair, the manifold is on the bottom. So you want to inspect that manifold and make sure that there are no cracks in it. And if I look at this one looks pretty good. The cool thing about this one is if there is a crack in it, I can take this to probably any pool supply store and get a replacement one of these and then put it back on. You don't want to put it back together with a cracked or broken manifold, because debris will bypass the filter cartridges and end up back in your pool. So I'm going to set this back on top, and I'm going to put this on pause so you can see me do this, because again, this particular one right there, that hole that I'm showing you right there, has got to go over that, and that can be a little tricky. So I'm going to pause it so you can watch me do it. Okay, hopefully you'll be able to see this. Again, I'm just going to position these over the holes and over that pipe, and I'm just going to gently work it down. Don't slam it. Just take your time and wiggle, and eventually you'll get it down just like that. And that's how that goes on. And that holds those cartridges in place. All right, last and not least, this little mesh screen. Remember, this went right on top of the manifold here. Sorry, right there. I'm going to put that back on top. I've already cleaned it, and it just sits right on top like that. Now, I'm ready to put the lid back on, but again, I'm going to put my gloves on so I don't get that fiberglass in my hands. Okay, gloves are on. And one thing to pay attention to, if you notice this lid, that pressure valve and the pressure gauge, I want them positioned in such a way that I'll be able to see it without having to have it facing the wall. But I also want to make sure that the pressure relief valve is in position in such a way that it doesn't blow on something. Like a lot of people have their air conditioning units by their pool equipment, so you don't want the pressure relief valve to be able to drain or blow onto that unit. So I've got it facing away from that. And again, when I put this on, I got to be very careful that I don't jar loose that O-ring gasket that creates the seal. So I'm just going to set it on there, kind of give it a couple little wiggles and snug it on. And that's good to go. Now, all I have to do is put my belly band on and secure it, and then test the thing for leaks. So, I'm going to grab my belly band, and again, this one's easy. This is a more modern unit, and again, I just look at the label on it so I know which side is up. And I'm going to set that belly band, again, careful not to jar everything. I'm going to set the belly band on there and bring it together. Now, again, the other thing, when you put your belly band on, make sure that it's positioned so that you can get into to the nut without having to run into like the wall or something. So I'm going to move it just a little bit to make access to it for both taking it off next time and tightening it up now easier. Now I'm also giving it a couple wraps because that helps it seat into the lip and create a better seal. All right, you see that? Now, again, back to my bolt and my nut. Now, notice the nut. See the tapered end? That's the end that goes in first, and then the nut part where the socket goes on goes after that. So, bolt goes in first, and then I put the nut on, and I just hand tighten it down like this. Now sometimes with one of these, as you're tightening it, sometimes you need to put something on this end of the nut to hold it in place, but maybe not. So I've got that on there. So I'm going to put this on. Actually, I'm just going to use my ratchet wrench because it's going to be easier because I've already hand tightened this one. So I'm going to put my socket back on my ratchet wrench, sorry. I'm going to start tightening it down. Now, as a guide, as I'm doing this, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll tighten it a few like this, and then I'll give it some taps. And the reason I'm tapping on the belly band, remember, tap on the belly band, not on the actual filter. What that does, that helps, again, seal that thing onto it and tighten it around it, so then I can tighten it down. So, these all have a little bit of a different type of schematic on how tight you should make them, and this actually has a statement here, I think, that tells me that this gap between the nut and the bolt, these two belly bands, should actually be pretty close to touching. So, I'm going to do the best I can to get it as close to that, all right? And that's pretty good. Now, all I have to do now is fire the unit up, which will fill the filter back up and check for leaks. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and I'm going to give you a very important warning as well. Okay, So, drain plug is in and secure, lubricated. Cartridges are clean, manifold was inspected, everything's good inside and put together correctly. Lids, both parts, were cleaned around their rims inside, and the O-ring was clean and lubricated and in place. Belly band is put on and tight. Yes? All right, now, very important here. I leave the pressure relief valve open. All right, so that'll allow the air to bleed out as the filter is filling with water. You don't need to go in and fill the bottom of the filter with water. These are self-priming pumps and they should pull enough water to prime themselves. However, while it's happening, keep your body, your hands, and especially your head away from this filter. And here's why. Again, this is critical and it could be life-threatening. If for some reason you did not get this belly band on correctly, and this thing builds pressure, which it will, it could blow this top part right off. And I have heard stories, and it's actually happened to my dad when I was younger. The lid blew off, and thankfully his head wasn't next to it. If your head is anywhere above this, when that happens, it could literally decapitate you. So that is a huge risk. So just keep yourself away from it while it's firing up and while it pressurizes, okay? So I'm gonna help you to watch this process. So I'm gonna go back to my pump, take it off the stop resume. So again, that red light goes off, so I know I can run it now. And I'm gonna hit quick clean on this particular unit. If you have something, an older Hayward or an older pump, you probably just flick the switch on, sorry. Okay, so it's gonna start to fire up, and it's gonna take a couple minutes for it to actually start to prime the pump. And I'm gonna let you listen to it because you'll hear it start to prime the pump. You can hear air hissing out of here. There the pump is starting to prime. There's water now flowing into the filter. And you'll notice at the pool, there's some air bleeding into the pool too, but that's fine, it's bleeding out of the pipes. And there you go. All right, so now I let it run for a second or two, and then I'm gonna close this. Notice I'm keeping my body away from the unit. I'm gonna close this pressure valve, and I'm gonna watch it for a couple minutes, all right? This is the way I tell if it's safe. If the pressure has built and I didn't get that belly band on correctly, by now it would have probably built enough pressure that it would have blown the top off of it. So I give it a few minutes, all right? And while that's happening, I'm gonna kind of look around this area. Don't worry about that water, that's just from the pressure relief valve. I'm gonna look down on the bottom of the drain plug, and I notice there is no water leaking. So guess what? A good sign. You also notice that here, and I don't know if you can see it, this is hard to see because these things get really dingy, but if you can look really closely, you can see the pressure in there. And what you want to do is you notice there's a green arrow and a red arrow. These are really good gauges. And what you can do is, once you've cleaned the cartridges and you know what the working pressure is with clean cartridges, you turn this little thing so that that green arrow lines up with the actual gauge inside. And I can't hardly read it. I think it's right about there, right? And then I can just leave it there, and as the cartridges get dirtier, the pressure will build, and when it gets to that red arrow, then that tells me probably a good time to clean the filters again. So everything looks good, and I think this job is about done. So gang, that is my lesson on how I clean a Hayward cartridge filter. Remember, I cannot stress this enough. When the unit is pressurizing, after you've put it all back together and it's running, make sure that as it's pressurizing, you keep your head, arms, body, everything, anybody away from the filter until it bleeds all the air out, and you close the pressure relief valve and you watch it for a minute or so. That way, in case you got the belly band on wrong or there was something wrong, and I have seen it happen. Thankfully it's never happened to me, but I have seen it happen to other people. You wanna be safe, because if that top part blows off, it can kill you. It really can. So please be very, very careful. Another thing to keep in mind is, depending on the filter and depending on the year, some of the newer Hayward models, like the one I just did, have the manifold on the top part of the guide for the cartridges, and some of them have it on the bottom. Same thing with the Pentair. Sometimes the Pentair filters, the cartridge, the manifold is on the bottom part of the guide for the cartridges, sometimes it's on the top. But one thing as a rule of thumb, if you pay attention to how you took your unit apart and the steps you did, like with the belly band, some belly bands, the nut has actually a washer, and then it has a spring, and it has another washer, and then the bolt goes through all of those and attaches to a nut on the other side, and you crank that down. So if you pay attention to how you took it apart and remember the order, just remember to put it back together in the reverse order of what you took it apart, and you should be fine. So that is my video for the day. I hope it helped. Please go back and review it if you need to. I thank you again for watching. If you have any questions or comments, you can always post them in the comment section below this video. Or as always, you can email me directly, and the address is going to show up down here. It will be kennypoolschool@gmail.com. Once again, kennypoolschool@gmail.com. And also, please remember to like and subscribe to this channel if you have not subscribed. Also, share this channel with your friends who have their own pool, who might like to save some money doing their pool service themselves. I again thank you for watching, and remember, have fun, be safe, and always, always, always watch those kids around water. I'll see you next time.